You're listening to the Hazard Ground Podcast, with service members from across the military sharing their stories of combat and survival. And now, here's your host, Mark Zeno.
Welcome into the Hazard Ground Podcast. As always, we appreciate you joining us each and every week. Before we get started with this week's episode, it's noteworthy to at least address with our audience, and even though this is outside the bounds of the military, we sit here as we get set to release this episode a day or two past the passing of Kobe Bryant as he was tragically killed in a helicopter accident along with his daughter and 7 other people. And I've seen so many tributes over the last 24, 48 hours about Kobe and his life and reminders that, hey, you know, anything can be taken from us at any point in time and nothing in life is guaranteed. And I only say that to our audience because much of our audience who has put on a uniform has been faced with their own mortality before. We've been faced with it almost on a daily routine basis while in combat. And it's not something a lot of people take the time to think about, their own mortality. And so when we tell these stories, we're often reminded that, hey, things can change in an instant. And I think that that is something that is a consistent theme on the Hazard Ground, but for civilians, they only come in contact with it every now and then. And here is the part that's hard for people to understand, is that for us in combat, we understand loss. We understand that things go wrong, and we're mentally prepared for it, or as best as we can be mentally prepared for the loss of people that we care about, the people that we love, the people we train with, etc. In the civilian world, the losses that they experience, like the death of Kobe Bryant, are from negligible accidents. And that's the part that's so hard for people to grasp. You know, it's not the same as somebody being killed in cold blood, or it's not the same as a disease taking life away, or somebody overdosing, or things like that. And I'm not comparing the loss, saying one is worse than the other. That's not it at all. This was an accident that there really is no explanation why. And despite whatever comes out from the flight recorder and all that other stuff, case in point, this was a routine trip for them and there was no real danger involved in it. And so that's where mortality begins to become a real issue for people, because it's hard to understand that something so innocent, like a simple accident, could cause so much grief and devastation. And so I say all this, again, just to remind our listeners that, you know, mortality is something we talk about a lot here on the podcast, and many people have been faced with it and come close to it and experienced it in many different sizes, ways, shapes, or forms. So with that in mind, we just remind you to take care of your loved ones, hug somebody you love, tell them the words that you love them, and make sure that they know. Because as we've said many times before, as trite as it may sound, nothing is guaranteed for tomorrow. With that, not exactly sure how to transition into our normal scheduled programming, but an episode coming up talking about one of the most important military engagements in military history in the post-Vietnam era for the United States, a 30-year anniversary on the Battle of Operation Just Cause. Really excited for you guys to hear this week's episode. Just a couple quick reminders again. Let's get those YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter followers up. We really want to grow the social media presence so we can connect with more of you all. Don't forget our promotion with Amazon. Go to the website, hazardground.com. Click on the Amazon banner, do all your normal Amazon spending. As long as you go through our website, hazardground.com first, we will get a percentage of what you spend, and then we'll donate it back to some of the charities you've heard featured here on the Hazard Ground. So with that all out of the way, we hope you enjoy this week's episode. Joining us this week is a retired Army sergeant who was part of the historic 75th Ranger Regiment, whose lone deployment was to Panama during Operation Just Cause, where he was wounded in one of the most interesting close-quarters combat fights in all of Ranger Regiment history. He is David Reeves, joining us on the Hazard Ground Podcast. David, welcome, man. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so again, we have told the story of Operation Just Cause in several different ways. A lot of people who we've spoken to about it, it was sort of one stop on the way along many other stops towards bigger events in their career, whether it be, you know, Mogadishu or onto the Gulf War and eventually into Afghanistan and Iraq. Some people have spanned it all. Unfortunately for you, this was your only deployment as you were wounded during it. We'll get to that more, but how'd you get your start in the military? Why'd you get in?
Well, I grew up in North Georgia, and the first I really thought about the military was I was in high school when Operation Eagle Claw happened,
Okay.
the Iranian hostage rescue attempt, and it didn't really spark an interest in me to join, but I became aware that there were people out there like that who had a completely different philosophy on life than I did. And I just couldn't imagine guys who would even attempt to do something like that mission. Later on, I was early in college when Grenada happened, Urgent Fury. And that's the first time I heard the word Ranger. And pretty much right then and there, I made up my mind that that's what I was going to do, and or at least try to do. And if they ever had another mission, my goal was to be on it. And so I went down to the recruiter, and he gave me a little pamphlet. And in reading that, there was a page in there about SF and Rangers, and that was my introduction to some little quotes from the Ranger Creed. And part of what they had written in there is surrender is not a Ranger word. And I couldn't justify quitting college to join a group or attempt to join a group whose ethos or mantra was never quit. So I finished up college and enlisted on the delayed entry program, and on a 11 X-ray unassigned Ranger contract, and that's what led me to 3rd Ranger Battalion.
What'd your parents say? Because obviously, I mean, again, college set you on a different path at that point in time. Not a lot of people go to college first. Back then, when people were signing up, it's because they couldn't go to college, right? Like guys in your era who signed up obviously pre-9/11 and even pre-Gulf War are guys who, kind of were looking for a different path in life, right?
A lot were. And I was surprised at the number. We had several college graduates in my platoon, but by and large, you are correct. And after I went in like 3 years after Grenada, so 4 years after Grenada, so they had seen my desire for it stay and not wane during that time, and so they were fine with that. They would not have been happy if I would have quit school and went into the military in, say, November of '83, just as a reaction to Grenada. I don't think they would have approved of that, but they were happy with the way it happened.
Okay, so you get to basic training. Is it what you thought it was going to be? Was it physically challenging for you?
Basic was basic, and is the best way I know to say it. I had spent obviously a couple of years knowing what I wanted to do and preparing for it. I'm a long ways from the fastest, the smartest, or the strongest, but I was a little disappointed and thought I might have made a mistake. The Army was coming in as a civilian. The Army was not what I thought it was.
What'd you think it was?
I didn't know. It's hard to explain. I thought I was going to be some high-speed guy out snooping and pooping and doing all this fancy stuff right off the bat, I guess, would be the best way to say it. And you come in and you start at the beginning and you start learning and you get put in your place and you learn and go from there. And so I'm completely fine with it now, but it was a little bit of an eye opener to me when I began.
That said, did you feel like you had made a bad decision? Like maybe Ranger School was going to be too much for you?
You never know about what Ranger School is going to be like, or RIP or battalion, and I was excited that I had the opportunity to try for it, and I knew I was going to give it my best, and I could sleep with myself and live with that as long as I'm giving it giving it my best shot. And so I knew I was going to be prepared for it, and we take it from there how it went.
How quickly do you get to Ranger School after basic and AIT?
The pipeline works went through basic, then went to airborne school at Benning, and after that was 3 weeks of what was then called RIP, Ranger Indoctrination Program.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, I went on to the battalion, and I was maybe 4 months before I got my slot. My slot came as a little bit of a surprise. We were actually doing a 3-week training deployment down in Panama, and I had no idea where I was on what we called the merit list. But the platoon leader came up to me as we were on the birds heading back to Benning from Panama and asked me if I could pass a PT test. And of course, being a young PFC, there's only one answer to that, and that's, yeah, I can, sir. And he said, well, good, you're going to pre-ranger as soon as we land. And that was my preparation for pre-ranger and ranger school right there. And so I was in an M60 team, and my gunner I went straight to pre-ranger barracks from landing, and my gunner brought all my gear over to me the next morning, and I clashed up with him.
Okay, so as you start this whole process, what are your thoughts and feelings?
Oh, I'm thinking I'm where I want to be. I'm doing what I want to do. I'm going to do my best. I'm definitely not going to quit. I think I can handle it, and I'm just going to go for it. And there's a lot of Ranger school stories out there, and it's a kick in the teeth. And somehow or another, at the end of it, they decided I was worthy to get a Ranger tab. But it was a lot of work. There was some good luck. There was some some things. You're going to have your bad days, and I certainly had mine. And did my best to help others when they were having theirs, and they would pull alongside me and help me on my bad days. And we made it through. And 58 days later, at that time, I was standing out on the parade field getting a Ranger tab pinned on me, which in the battalion that moved me up from a PFC to a specialist E4, and I came out, and then I was an M60 gunner, and that's how Ranger school went. And it was a big step for me. I was happy. I felt like I'd accomplished a major goal in my life at that time, and it was difficult, and I was proud of myself.
Best and worst part of Ranger school for you personally?
Oh man, worst part of Ranger school. Best part is probably realizing that I was what we call tabbed out, and that is you've completed all the requirements, and now I'm just not going to mess up bad enough to get kicked out here in these last few days. Worst part, I was what we called a droner. It was hard for me to stay awake that long. I definitely learned how to walk while I was sound asleep. I remember one day we had a desert phase then, and it was out in Dugway, Utah, and it was our last phase. And I was walking point on a platoon-sized movement, and it was in mid to late November and snowing really hard. And being from Georgia, I never had really seen snow like that. And I just pretty much just went to sleep while I was walking, being hypnotized by that snow. And I looked up and I see a guy in front of me, and I think it's another patrol that must have walked up on the back of. So I jog up there and ask him who he is, and he's the rear security or the last man in the patrol that I was walking point for. Every single one of those guys had walked right past me, and I was still walking. I was just sound asleep and oblivious to where I was going. And that was my first time ever in a desert environment and wide open spaces like that, and snow. And that was probably one of my worst ones. Some other guys who were there probably could think of some worse that I did, but that one sticks out.
That's a great story. All right, so you finished Ranger School and you're moving on. What year, month is this when you graduate?
I graduated Ranger School in November of 1988.
Okay. And you're going right to the 75th Ranger Regiment, right?
Right. Oh, I'd already been there.
Okay.
I'd come there right after RIP. I'd been in the regiment for 4 or 5 months probably at this time.
All right, so it's a little bit of time before you have to go to Panama. What is anything going on in the lead up before you start hearing the words Panama?
We started hearing the words Panama right away.
Oh, really?
And we were hearing about Panama in 88, and we were actually practicing some contingencies for it throughout 88. In 89, we went to Puerto Rico. Then in the summer, we made our second trip to Panama and working in out of Fort Sherman in the Jungle Operations Training Center there, and came back from that. I went to a school that was then called PLDC, which is the school you go to right before you get sergeant stripes pinned on you.
It went from PLDC to I think it was called Warrior or something, like Warrior School, or they changed the name of it so many times. But I just remember when I was a lieutenant, PLDC was everything to the enlisted world, and you would never see sergeant stripes until you completed PLDC. Then they started giving out sergeant stripes left and right to everybody before PLDC.
Right, and I was in the regiment. I was one of the early guys that had to go to PLDC, and so I went to that. I think about that time frame is they had a coup attempt in Panama, and some of Noriega's guys tried to take over, and our training seemed to change about that time. They came over. There were 5 or 6 of us from 3rd Ranger Battalion in my PLDC class. They came and got us, and we graduated like 2 days early, and we went to England. And in England, of all places, we practiced airfield seizures for about 3 weeks straight, and came back, did some more training, and then we went into another. In late November, early December, we went into another 3-week training period that culminated with a regimental mission down in Florida that, to my knowledge, there never had been a regimental mission before. It was very unusual to be working with our sister Ranger battalions or alongside of them, if not directly. When we probably while we were in the air flying back from that Florida mission, Noriega decides to declare war on us. So, and the other interesting thing about the Florida mission was all the objectives had the exact same names as they had in England. and all our tasks were practically exactly the same as what we had just done in England. So you're starting to think, even though nobody's saying anything, that we're training for something fairly specific here. And but none of that was coming down to my level. But you had the sense of it, or I had the sense of it. Then so we're back from there, and I remember it was a Sunday afternoon, and I lived on base and was in the little NCO section of the barracks that we had, and there was my roommate, and we're watching football on TV, and the CQ runner comes in and says, "Hey, battalion's on alert," and we're looking at each other like, "Yeah, right, we're on alert. It's a week before Christmas. They're not going to mess with us right now." So we keep watching the game, and after a few minutes, we decide we'll go look outside and see. And sure enough, we are on alert. And we didn't get the word that it was Panama right then. And there were a couple of other training type contingencies that it could have been, but you had the general feel that this was it. And we were going. So we just went into our sequence. Then a couple hours into that, they gave us the word that we were going to go back and redo the Florida mission. So we got that word. All the NCOs were in the platoon CP, and the platoon leader told us that. And so we're looking around at each other like, okay, we're going to go do that. And somebody pipes up and says, "Well, what's our packing list?" And Lieutenant Gibbons says, "Take anything you might need." And I don't know if he knew then or not, but that was all that we needed to know, that we were going. So next thing we did was we finished our packing, told us to get some rest, and we'd be moving over to Savannah to link up with 1st Ranger Battalion. And 2nd Ranger Battalion would be flying in from Fort Lewis to link up with Alpha and Bravo companies of 3rd Battalion. So a couple hours later, we get the word the buses are there, and we go out. And when we went on the training mission, we bused to Savannah also, but we went in chartered buses, and there were like 4 of the Green Army school buses sitting out there for us on this night. And we're just like, well, whatever we're doing, there wasn't any notice or planning involved in this. So we cram on those buses, and through the middle of the night, we arrive, probably right at daylight, we arrive in Savannah. And they just told us at the building and the location we were at, they told us just go inside and don't come outside. They were trying not to get any satellite signature for anybody who might be watching us. And not long after that, we get the official word that it is Panama, and it is the mission that we've been practicing.
At any point in time when you hear that, does it make you nervous? Does it make you scared?
It does make you nervous, and you go from or me at least, you go from the peacetime Army, and there's always that contingency, and we always trained for it, but you never know. It's like a pipe dream or something that may happen and may not. So you're nervous and you're scared is it real, and how am I going to react to it? Am I going to be able to do my job? Is the main fear that I had, and then the fear of the unknown that people normally have when you're doing something for the first time. So not a terrifying fear, but a common fear of soldiers, of particularly possibly going to combat for the first time, is what's it going to be like, and how am I going to perform?
Right. So when do you actually get to Panama? When do you go wheels up and head over?
We left probably about 4:00 in the afternoon on the 19th
of December, 1989.
Of December, yes, 1989. Okay. It may have been a little later than that. We jumped at 01 on 20 December.
Okay.
And so our part of the mission was at Torrijos International Airport. There's a military area to it and a civilian area to it. And Charlie Company 3rd Battalion mission was to secure the civilian area of that airport. And so it's and the reason 01 was chosen was that was a time the airport was supposed to be deserted. They didn't have any incoming flights scheduled at that time. Of course, the way things work, that it didn't work out that way, and it was a up and running operational airport with a lot of passengers inside there due to some late landings, which is what got us going. So we jump out, and it's the airport's all lit up. There's all the runway lights are on, the lights in the building are on. There's normal airport vehicles moving around. Can see a little bit of tracer fire going both up and down from some of aircraft we had providing cover and fire. We were not in the same situation that the guys over at Rio Hato were in, meaning that once on the ground, we were able to link up without having to fight to our assembly areas, by and large, at least on the civilian airport where I was.
For those who don't know, Operation Just Cause lasted a little over a month, lasts about 5 weeks. So you get there, you kick off on 20 December, and it goes through the end of January. We're coming up on the 30-year anniversary of the ending of Operation Just Cause. Before your particular engagement, how long are you there, and kind of what's the day-to-day operation like?
Oh, I'm not there very long at all. It's right away. It's within the hour is when my part of it happens, and when I'm wounded. So basically we jump out, and we had heard on the way down, we had got a message. We got 2 messages. One, they know we're coming. And 2, we got the message to expect civilians there and be weapons tight, which to us, weapons tight meant you had to be under a direct threat before you could engage anyone. So we jump out and we land, and right away they start taking hostages, and they break out a couple of windows. And in our assembly area, I landed on the stripe on the runway. That's how close to the terminal buildings we're landing. And our assembly area was at probably 200 meters away from the runway out where a taxiway intersects it. So they take hostages, break out some windows, and they get some English speakers. And they're women and they're just screaming bloody murder for us to not come in there or they're going to kill them. And then they take a baby from one of them, and one lady is just going berserk that they've got my baby and they're gonna kill my baby. So we're laying out in the assembly area listening to this, and it's getting real pretty fast, because we know exactly where we're going is right inside that terminal building was my squad's mission. And so and at this point I'm a fire team leader, and we're working we're a 5-man squad. So we've got two-man clearing teams, and squad leader Sergeant Thorland who's directing us, and then he'll backfill for any casualties we take. So we're pretty light, and we've got a pretty big area to clear. So we're assembled. We watch. Once we get enough accountability, second squad moves out and clears a outbuilding, which was a fire station, and from there they provide support for us or overwatch for us. Mm-hmm. And we move out in, without a doubt, the biggest, widest wedge I've ever seen. Is we cross about 200 meters of just open tarmac, heading right into them. We get there, we drop our rucks. First squad moves around the building to their objective, and we move inside on the downstairs level, and we've got a long hallway with masonry walls and metal doors, and all the doors were locked. We didn't have anything with us that was capable of breaching those doors. So we go back outside, and there's a window that's probably about 4.5 feet off the ground, and it's got mini blinds on it, and the lights are on inside. And Sergeant Thorland and I break out the glass on that, and he says he's going to give me a boost. And I'm a pretty big guy. I'm 6'4". At that time, I was probably about 205 pounds, and mm-hmm. Thorland's probably 5'10" and maybe 230, just incredible athlete. And so his boost winds up me flying head first through the mini blinds. Thank goodness no one was in there. And from there, we're able to gain access to all the other rooms downstairs, and we clear those, and we find a stairwell that's got a glass door to it, and we begin to move upstairs to clear that portion of it. And this is a boarding gate area. It's a big round room, maybe 120 feet by 120 feet, with chairs. It's got chairs in it for seating. It's got the agent's desk for the flights. It's got a couple of doors leading off of it, and it's got those walkways that you walk down to before you board an aircraft. So we get up the stairs, and Eubanks and Kelly clear the first room, and then it's Farber and I's turn, and Farber goes in first. It's a little 3x3 room. This is a bathroom, by the way. And we hit that door. I flow past him through the next door, and I'm going hard right. And as soon as I enter, there's a guy standing 180 degrees to my left. And that's when everything just went into slow motion for me.
All right, so just let me set this up again for everybody listening so we can get the visual. You're going through the bathroom door and making a hard right. When you say 180 degrees, he's directly behind you to your left. So if you had made a left, you would have been facing him, correct?
I left would have been the correct move for me to make. Yes, sir.
Okay. So you essentially turned your back to him.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm probably I'm not 180 degrees, but I'm a good 135, 150 degrees. I'm turning hard. And so I start to turn, and I hear, or in my mind, I'm thinking, I don't have time. And then the next thought I have is that this is going to be really messy. And I was carrying a 203, and being an optimist, I was just assuming I was going to be able to make that turn fast and get around off, and it was going to be messy when it hit him. Well, he lets loose with a burst, and time had slowed down so much that I could see, when an automatic rifle fire, it looks like just one big flame. Well, to me, it was just boom, 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 like individual shots. And I might be maybe 2 feet away from him. And it hits me and just knocks me down as if you would have hit me with a baseball bat across the chest.
Mm-hmm.
So not real sharp pain, but you're down, or I'm down. And while I'm falling, I knew I was dead. There was no question in my mind, no thought about anything else. So I thought, well, Mom, I'm sorry about that, because I knew that this was going to really hurt her. I hit the ground, and I'm laying there, I assume dead, and I'm a Christian. And my next thought was, how long is it going to take to get to heaven, and what's it going to be like? And I've got no perception of time at all, but I hear voices and I can't understand what they're saying. And my first thought is, I should be able to understand voices in heaven. and that's when I realized I was alive. And it was the two enemy soldiers were talking to each other, and that's what I was hearing. So I have a great fear of being executed. Then is the best way I know how to say it. There's still really no thought of I'm going to survive this, but at least I can choose how I go.
Is there any thought, Dave, like you're basically not even 3 hours into the operation, like,
right?
I mean, are you sitting here thinking anything like, I mean, how does this happen to me? Like, how did I end up here? We haven't even gotten started yet, and I'm already wounded and bleeding.
Later, and I've spent a lot of years with a lot of guilt and a lot of embarrassment about that. But at that time, no. When I heard them screaming out those windows, it was on, and that was a life-changing moment, I guess you could say, for me, particularly at least as far as this engagement goes. But at that point, I was worried about other things, and hadn't got there yet. But that thought of how did this happen so fast, and definitely came later, and still exists to this day. And so I'm looking around and saying, what am I going to do? As soon as they realize I'm alive, they're gonna shoot me. And so I decided to crack one eye open look at my situation, and I can see my rifle's laying on the floor about 2 or 3 feet away from me. And I can see a pool of blood that's growing, but growing slowly. And so I know that I'm not going to bleed out in the next minute or so, which is about what as much time as I think I've got. So I start to reach for my rifle. My arm won't work, so I can't get it. And my pockets, the old BDU cargo pockets, are just crammed full of grenades. So I say, well, I'm going to get a grenade. And my plan was to pull the pin on the grenade and sit there with it. And if it came a time I could use it, I would use it. If it didn't have a time to use it, at least I could fight back and hopefully take them with me. What I failed to remember is when you've only got one arm that works, it's mighty difficult to open pockets to cargo pants, and it sure is difficult to stealthily pull a pin on a grenade. So while I'm fiddling around with that, the room just explodes again. And Kelly and Eubank had come in, and they're laying down a base of fire, trying to see where I am and if I'm alive and see how to evacuate me. So next thing I know, Kelly's low crawling to me, and I'm watching him out of the corner of my eye, and his K-pot just goes flying off his head. And being a young NCO, I just look at him and say, man, put your K-pot back on. You're going to get hurt in here. And I don't think he even knew it got shot off at that point. And he drags me out, and they prop me up and begin to work on me. And then we begin to devise some plans for them to go back in and clear the room. So Thorland's guiding everything. Farber's pulling first aid on me. Kelly and Eubank approach the room again. By now, all this weapons tight business is done with, and we're able to use whatever force that we deem necessary. So they throw a grenade in, come back and prepare to open the door. Well, the door won't open the second time due to the blast of the first grenade. Kelly's got a cooked off grenade in his hand. So being having good sense, we hear frag in, and he tosses the grenade over into the seating area. Farber dives on top of me to shield me from anything, and the grenade goes off, and none of us are hurt from that. By now, all of us are pretty mad, and these guys need to go. So they go in with another grenade, and I'm outside the room. I'm not inside when this is happening. But so I'll tell a little bit of their part of the story as I know it. And we've definitely all kept in touch over the years and feel like I know it as good as anybody, but I certainly don't want to discredit them or add to it or take away from it. But they go in again, and by now this is a bathroom. So all all the sinks and all the toilets have just exploded. There's water shooting everywhere from them. There's several inches of water on the floor. My blood's all over the floor. The porcelain's all over the floor. And one of these guys sticks his head out a little bit too far, and Eubank shoots him. Well, Kelly goes over to clear him, and as he does, he slips. And as he slips, he's doing like a baseball slide, and the guy goes out the window. They had a floor-to-ceiling windows there, and we've got an M60 team positioned just so happens right below that window. And guy hits the ground, starts to reach into his pistol belt to pull a pistol, and at that point, the assistant gunner on the M60 team kills him. While this is going on, the other guy jumps out and starts going hand to hand with Eubank. And it's a life and death battle. Eubank is fighting him off as best they can. Kelly sees it, comes over and gets himself into a position to where he can shoot and kill the guy. And that eliminates the threat. And the room's now secure. So that's a few words for a heck of a fight and a heck of a job that those guys did. And now the attention turns to me and my first aid, and eventually the area is deemed secure enough, and I'm carried downstairs to a collection point, casualty collection point, and wait for a medevac to come in and get me, and then I'm flown to Howard Air Force Base, where they've got I would call it a MASH unit. I don't know the proper name, but they've got tent hospitals set up out by the runway, and go in there, and they do one surgery on me there, and other than that, it's just trying to get everybody stable. And then they give us all chest tubes, which I don't recommend getting chest tubes, but and then I'm put on a C-141 and flown to Texas and began a several month long recuperation in the hospital there. And the guys in my squad, after they get me down to the casualty collection point, they continue on and complete their mission of that night. And then later, the next morning, Charlie Company, 3rd Ranger Battalion is called out, and they go and clear La Comandancia in downtown Panama City, which is in the area of Modelo Prison and where Kurt Muse was. Though not the same building, just close by. And they clear that. Our platoon takes several more wounded in that part of the operation. And then the guys in Texas, we were at Wilson Hall and Lackland Air Force Base. And so they put us all in the same room in the hospital, which was pretty neat. So we got to get together, get better together. The rest of the unit continued on and completed whatever missions they were given as for the duration until it was time to come back to Fort Benning, Georgia. That was my participation in it. From then, it was just focus on getting better.
Right.
I know I'm hurt bad, and I'm assuming that my military career is over, and the doctors I'm completely happy with. They worked hard, and with the technology available, they did. I'm as functional as I could possibly expect to be, particularly from taking a burst like that at that range, and so it worked on getting better. Got as good as it was going to get. I asked the doctor what I could expect, and he said that I was on a permanent no push-ups profile, no jumping profile, and my options in the Army were severely limited. So when they offered me a medical board, I accepted that, and it did continue to get better. Probably that took about a year, and probably a year from the injury, I could do one push-up. Maybe 6 or 7 years after the injury, I could do 10 push-ups, and now I can do as many push-ups as I decide to train to do, and so I'm happy. And the damage to me was one round through the left side, right under my armpit, that came out the center of my back. My rifle was to my front, and it took 7 rounds, and then it hit my collarbone on my right side, and blew out about a 3-inch chunk of collarbone and another small bone called the acromion bone. So, and that's what wound up doing the damage to the joint. So proud to have been there, but it was a short trip, like you said, and but it was definitely an interesting one for me.
Any regrets about your time in service?
No. The only regret is getting hurt. That's the only regret. And I don't want. Obviously, when you go through an intense situation, you relive it many times, and you what if it, and if I'd have done this, and if I'd have done that, how could it have turned out different? And I regret some of what guys in my squad had to go through to get me out and clear that room, and I regret that I was not able to finish my enlistment and the choice of whether I was going to stay and either in the Ranger Regiment or do other things was not an option, and that's the only regret. But the time I was there, I was doing exactly what I wanted to do, and I wouldn't have it any other way, and I wouldn't have it any other way than me being first through that door.
Right. Is there any part of you that when you see how the rest of history unfolds, again, with Mogadishu and Desert Storm and everything else, are you upset that you weren't there for any of that?
Yes, I've obviously demonstrated I'm not the world's greatest warrior, but I still, that warrior blood runs through my veins, and to see the men and women that came behind me and the history they've made, and the battles that they've been involved in, yes, I regret having to watch that on TV, or just to hear stories from my buddies. I definitely regret that, because it's what this generation of soldiers has done is completely remarkable in my mind. What little I know about it, they're so much better and more advanced than we were in our day, and they've fought so hard and brought so much pride to me and to us as a nation, and I definitely regret not being able to participate.
How do you reconcile all that now? I mean, is it just something that happened and you're done with it, or does it still kind of haunt you even after all these years?
You know, that's a tricky one, and it does haunt me after all these years, and I try really hard not to let a few seconds
alter the rest of your life. Yeah. I mean, because in reality, if you were going to make this a career, when you got in, I mean, you would have been part of the war on terror. You would have been in Afghanistan or Iraq at some point if you had done 20 years.
Absolutely. I'd have been a
grizzled veteran at that point in time.
Yes, sir. I'd have been a platoon sergeant or a first sergeant or who knows, but I would have been involved in that. And I was in Charlie Company. It was Bravo Company that was in Mogadishu. So don't know if I would have still been in Charlie Company, or hard to say that I would have been involved in that. But to not have the chance was is just not always easy to
right.
Not always easy to reconcile, and I hate to. I don't know that I could do anything any better. I think my actions proved that I would have maybe done something worse, but I'm very glad I was the first man through that door, because if anybody was going to get hit, let it be me. To take a burst like that and live, if I'd have been in any other position, or anyone else in a different body shape or size or any different position, would have been dead.
Mm-hmm.
You feel the same thing as, why can't I, and why do the soldiers today have to carry that burden, and I'm not able to help other than wave the flag and cheer them on. So,
do you still talk to formerly Specialist Eubanks and Private First Class Kelly?
Oh, yes.
I mean, did they go on to stay in the military and have long careers, or?
No, they did not. Farber did. He retired, and Thorland got out during the drawdown in the mid-'90s in one of the Clinton drawdowns.
Oh, those were the good old days.
Yes, sir. That's right when you came in, I believe.
Well, that's how I was basically not kicked off active duty, but they were looking for people. They were looking for officers to leave active duty, and a whole bunch of us had applied for a program at that point in time to send us all to the Guard, and it was literally 3 months before 9/11 is when I left active duty.
Oh, wow. And so and fortunately, I say fortunately, I don't mean to speak for you, but you were able to continue serving, able to deploy.
Oh, yeah. I mean, listen, David, I don't know that I could have thought or picked for my career to work out better the way it did. It's not conventional. It's not the way everybody would have done it, but I'm very, very lucky to have had the career that I've had. I'm blessed to still be alive and all in one piece, but to that end, there are many like you who don't have that great fortune, but still, all things considered, I've been very lucky and fortunate throughout my career, and I don't know that there would be much of it I would change. I tell people I would have been less of a punk asshole as a lieutenant. That I definitely would go back and change. But as far as the course that my career took, I don't know that I would have wanted or needed it to go any different. I've said, and I've realized this after 20 years, that the Army has a way, and the military has a way of always putting you where you're supposed to be. And I have a lot of trust and faith in that everyone's journey throughout the military is exactly what it was supposed to be for a given variety set of reasons. For you, it was because, as you stated, if you weren't the first person through that door, Eubanks or Kelly wouldn't be alive today. I mean, they might not have survived those rounds. So I think that we can all look back and wish things had gone different or wonder what things would like if they had been different. But even in your case, David, I don't know that your service or your sacrifice is any less justified, warranted, or important just because the long and the short of your military career lasted less than 3 years.
And I appreciate that, and I also agree with that 100%. And going back to if I'd have been completely healthy, who knows how long I would have lasted. And I'm not afraid to admit that even though I loved and was extremely proud to be in the Ranger Regiment, I was a long ways away from being God's gift to Rangers. I wasn't the fastest guy. I wasn't the strongest guy. I wasn't the smartest guy. I grabbed hold of that rope and I held on for dear life and just did the best I could with it and refused to quit. And somehow or another, they decided to continue to promote me and put me in different positions as my during that short career that I had. But whether I could have held up, it's a big assumption saying you're going to hold up physically in not just in a special operations unit, in an infantry unit, in any kind of unit. It's a hard physical job. And so, but I agree 100% with you that it happened the way it did for a reason. I sleep good at night with that, but I do feel that I missed getting to participate in all the events that have happened since. However, I'm okay with that. I can live with it.
Well, to that end, David, I mean, if you're in that spot, then I'm glad. And certainly, what happened to you, as you mentioned, a lot of people wouldn't have survived. So thankfully you did. And the message and the story still serve not only our listeners, but just everybody in general, that your slice of the pie and your piece of your service it isn't measured in how much or how long you do it. It's just measured in whatever your service time is, that you made the most of it. And I think that to that end, you certainly embodied that whole sort of spirit.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And was able to come full circle here a couple of weeks ago when about 100 of us went back to Panama.
Oh, really?
And that was really neat to fly in on a commercial plane into that same airport and walk down those same halls again. And when I got off the plane, got a buddy who was on the plane with me, and we went straight to that bathroom and that gate area. And they've done a lot of remodeling, but the gate area is still identifiable, and the old bathroom door doesn't open anymore, but it's still there, and really neat to see that, and to spend a few days with the people of Panama and some other Just Cause vets down there. And
you know, I'm so jealous of that. I really, like, we've talked to people, Vietnam vets, who have gone back to their spot in Vietnam. I remember remarking in a journal that I kept during my deployment that I hope to go back to Iraq one day. And now I went back there 5 years later as into deployment, but you know,
right.
I hope to go back there one day and walk around and, you know, shorts and a t-shirt, and just be able to go back to certain spots that forever will be linked in my memory for some sort of catharsis and closure on everything that we went through. And I really hope that there is a time and place where that can happen down the road. Obviously, with the world the way it is right now, it doesn't look like it's going to happen anytime soon, but hopefully it'll happen. But I certainly am jealous of people like you who got to do that.
And I hope that does happen. I hope that happens for you too. And I hope the people in those old battlegrounds are thriving, and the result of the fruit of, I'm going to call it labor. I know that's a poor word choice, but the fruit of that labor is realized, and the country's a better place, and the people are in a better position. And it did me good to see that, the growth that Panama has had, and how well they are doing. We were there in '88 and they were in bad shape. Was there in the summer of '89 and it was just a mess. And then in the winter of '89, it was, for the invasion, it was obviously a bad place. But December of 2019, it was a nice place to be, and to be mostly welcomed by the people. It was nice also, and to walk those grounds, and to maybe exercise some ghosts. There wasn't a boogeyman hiding in there waiting to jump out and get me. It was just a room is all it was, like so many others. And that was good. That was good as well to see that.
Well, David, again, an incredible story, and certainly thank you for sharing it with us after all these years. And I know as the 30-year anniversary approaches for you, as we sit here in the middle of January recording this, as I mentioned earlier, there'll be some emotions and feelings and everything as you try to reflect back on the last 30 years. But just know that, again, even though it was a short amount of time you put on a uniform, there was an impact, and you certainly impacted lives around you. So we thank you for that. Again, thank you for sharing your story, and thanks for being part of the Hazard Ground.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for all you do. I appreciate it very much.
You've been listening to the Hazard Ground Podcast, hosted by Mark Zeno and produced by Matt Pasquarella. If you have an interesting story to tell and you'd like to be on the show, send us an email at hazardgroundpodcast@gmail.com. And if you like the show, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.